Are you ready to hit on high upside rookies that you can draft in rounds 15 or later that can make a real impact on your 2026 fantasy football team? Let's talk through rookie sleepers, late round targets. We talked about them all NFL draft season. And now that we have actually seen them in action, we've seen the hype videos and we know exactly how they are going to fit into their offenses. It is time for us to talk about which ones that you should be targeting in your fantasy drafts and what expectations you should have in terms of fantasy production in year one. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Before you jump in the comments and say, Tara, I'm not drafting a Browns wide receiver because the Browns suck. Hear me out on this one. Hear me out. Let's talk about Denzel Boston. Now, I am not including KC Concepcion on this list because his ADP varies a lot and it is definitely rising. I could easily see him settling in around round 10 in just a couple of weeks. Some people are very high on KC Concepcion, not necessarily low on Denzel Boston, but just specifically high on Concepcion. If either one of these guys were drafted to a better location, the hype would be insane. I actually think that they're both very good value picks. But reports all offseason have been glowing regarding Denzel Boston. Boston and Concepcion are very physically different players and they will have different roles. They can coexist here. Boston has size, excellent hands, and he is a strong contested catch receiver, and he has been showcasing that all training camp. Concepcion is definitely the safer pick here because his usage would be more quarterback friendly, so he would be less likely to be impacted by volatile quarterback play in Cleveland and be more of a volume play. Boston, being more of the traditional X receiver, would be more than likely at the mercy of quarterback play, so there is risk involved here, but Boston's talent is worth the risk, especially because while I don't have a ton of faith in the Browns quarterback room, I do know that Todd Monken's specialty is quarterbacks. Kevin Stefanski really wasn't one for developing or even really elevating talent. Monken spent much of his coaching career coaching young quarterbacks in college, and he doesn't get enough credit for the work that he did with Lamar Jackson. Obviously, Lamar was always fantastic, right? But we really saw his pass game truly elevated with Monken. So it's possible that he could get usable volume out of the Browns quarterbacks. And if he does, and this revamped offensive line actually hits, then the young ascending wide receivers can just go ahead and push Jerry Jeudy out of the way and make a fantasy impact in year one. There is no locked in wide receiver one in Cleveland. It's wide open, and Boston could earn that role, or at the very least wide receiver two. And if he does, he will pay off big at his ADP. Before we move on to our next player, and spoiler alert, the next player is Ted Hurst, so do not leave. You definitely want to hear about that. This video is sponsored by RotoWire. You can get 25% off through the link below in the video description and use my code TERA, T-E-R-A. That will get you amazing tools, and it's a great way to support my channel as well, so that's a win-win for both of us. One of the tools that I recommend is the ability to build your own custom rankings and cheat sheet, because let's be honest, you have your own point of view, you have your own favorite players, you have your key sleeper targets, and you have your guys that you straight up do not want to draft, literally, unless they drop 6 rounds, and even then you're going to question it, right? So you've got your fades there. You can adjust your cheat sheet to your league settings and choose your default rankings and ADP source. You can customize your targets, your fades, and you can adjust how aggressively you want to target them and what types of statistics that you want to see on your cheat sheet. And you can even prioritize reaching for your guys versus adhering to ADP. So there's a lot of flexibility here for you to plan out your literal perfect draft. So if this were my draft sheet, I would go straight to Denzel Boston, and I would say I'm a true believer in Denzel Boston. I will not be waiting until pick 161 to get him. Nope. I will drag him up further in my rankings, and I would adjust all of my settings, and then maybe I would do a mock draft as well before using the draft assistant on draft day to make sure that I execute my strategy perfectly. Again, you can get 25% off through the link below in the video description using my code TERA. Now on to Ted Hurst. You guys know that I love Emeka Egbuka, but when it comes to late round value, I strongly, I cannot emphasize this enough, I strongly advise that you do not pass up on Ted Hurst. The Bucs have been very vocal about how receivers will be lining up this year. They have repeatedly referred to Hurst as an ex-receiver. All of their receivers have diversity, very talented group, right? And they can play all over the place, but they have said that Emeka Egbuka will play Z receiver, and they would like Godwin to be in the slot. We've seen Godwin very successful there. And then Jalen McMillan is obviously very versatile, but when we've seen him pop, it has been specifically for filling in on Godwin's role when he was hurt. And yes, the depth chart does list McMillan as the starter over Hurst, but that is not solidified. It is preliminary. Hurst could very well be a starter immediately and have a meaningful role right off the bat at a very low ADP, insane value. And the Bucs are in for a bounce back season. As a whole, yes. The reasons for Tampa Bay's offensive struggles in 2025 are going a little bit overlooked. It's very easy to say that it was Baker Mayfield regressing and coming back down to earth, and there was regression, but it wasn't just that, right? We talked about this in the bounce back video. Through the first 11 weeks of the season, Baker Mayfield had 7 QB1 finishes, and that was not a layup stretch defensively. And he was not afraid to trust in his young rookie, Emeka Egbuka, early on. So we could see that apply this season to Ted Hurst. And then after week 11 through the end of the season, Baker Mayfield had just 1 QB1 finish. And honestly, that was a pretty easy defensive stretch there. Obviously, the offensive line was dealing with injuries. Baker Mayfield was playing through multiple injuries while they were also dealing with a play caller that was in over his head. A healthier offensive line combined with a new offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson, who typically runs a very balanced offense with plenty of pass volume, will provide enough volume to support multiple receivers. Chris Godwin has struggled through multiple injuries for multiple seasons now. Maybe he turns it around. It's possible. But age at this point could be an issue, and he could be regressing just due to age. Hurst has the potential to be the second look behind Egbuka, maybe the third look. That would still be okay for the value and have a strong rookie season at an extremely cost-effective ADP. He is a must target late round. So I knew the 49ers injuries were coming. We all knew the 49ers injuries were coming. I at least thought that it would hold off until in season, but no. Ricky Pearsall is out for the season. George Kittle is still a question mark for week 1. And FYI, just if he does make it back early season, be aware that does not guarantee he will play a full season. That is not typically the George Kittle experience. History has shown that ain't happening. Mike Evans is already dealing with an injury. And to be fair, so is Stribling. He did return, though. They're obviously being a little bit cautious with these guys that are getting these little injuries in camp. We've all talked about the elevated risk for Christian McCaffrey. And while doubling back to Mike Evans, I'm not specifically opposed to Mike Evans at his ADP per se, but the repeated hamstring injuries at his age are not a good thing. So as I mentioned before, with this group of highly injury-prone receivers and pass catchers that we have already seen one go down, it is entirely possible that at some point Deshaun Stribling is the wide receiver 1 of this team. Now, the 49ers did sign Deebo Samuel. Welcome home, Deebo. Who says you can't go home here? And they're excited to have him back. They've got plans. Stribling still has, though, about the cleanest path to being a top look and a highly effective offense as you can get for a guy that is being drafted and ranked outside of the top 200 overall. And since Deebo signed that, hey, look at it this way. Stribling's ADP is not going to make a massive leap. We would have seen it make a leap with the injury to Ricky Pearsall. So now Deebo signing does ensure that Stribling is definitely going to be a later round pick. And even for perspective, as we talk about other rookies here, the going rate for a rookie that is not named Tate, Lemon Tyson, and such is extremely cheap. There's a significant gap between him and the other guys here. So the odds of guys like Stribling cracking the top 150 are extremely slim. So we are talking late round targets at the end of your fantasy drafts. It's perfect, right? Given the extreme injury risks for everyone, ironically not named Deebo Samuel, Stribling is worth a shot here. Now, this pick is very dependent on league size because you need bench depth to be able to make this pick because you have to have the space to acknowledge that Coleman could potentially be sitting on your bench for a while because he is more than likely not going to be a usable fantasy asset earlier during the season, so you're going to have to wait for that inevitable J.K. Dobbins injury to be able to use him. The theory here is that Coleman profiles as the direct replacement for Dobbins so that Sean Payton can maintain his two-back committee with Coleman and RJ Harvey. Dobbins is essentially, or was essentially last year, a low-end RB2. He averaged 11 fantasy points per game in half PPR. That's not bad. The only caveat is that it wasn't really fancy production because he was very uninvolved in the pass game. So basically, he had a ceiling of a high-end RB2 and a floor of a low-end RB3. So it was rather steady production rather than boom weeks for him. Harvey could get up there in terms of a ceiling when J.K. Dobbins was playing, but his floor was atrocious because the bulk of the work on the ground was going to Dobbins. So, with Coleman, we are investing a late round draft pick in deep leagues with the hope that Coleman will end up being a low-end RB2. Not necessarily massive, insane league-winning production, unless he can take away some of that receiving work from RJ Harvey, but solid production and essentially very cheap for a handcuff. And it is possible that he could actually have a higher ceiling than what Dobbins had last year because the Denver offense is changing offensive coordinators and they have a lot of room to become more productive in terms of scoring. So perhaps we can get more efficiency, more goal line opportunities, and better production for the early down backs and the goal line back, which eventually can be Jonah Coleman. I felt oddly passionate about Jacoby Lane as a prospect. Now, by no means does me being super passionate about a prospect mean that he is guaranteed to hit. I do make mistakes, but I feel very positive about it and have confirmation bias now that we are finally getting very clear news out of training camp that Jacoby Lane looks fantastic. We'd been hearing news that Devontae Walker was going to step up this year, but I'm very skeptical, I'll be honest there, because the Ravens receiving core has been desperate for a wide receiver 2 for a while now to truly step up, and Walker hasn't really made an impact, a remote impact at all, in the past 2 seasons, his 2 young seasons here. I firmly believe that Rashad Bateman is just a guy. Mark Andrews is aged, and it is tough to ignore the steady decline that we have seen from him for 3 straight seasons in terms of volume. He has become very touchdown dependent. And now there is a new contested guy in town in Jacoby Lane, and he could easily take red zone looks away. And there's also, of course, fellow rookie Elijah Surratt, who I do like, and a lot of analysts like him and seem to favor him as well. But again, I do believe that Lane was the better prospect. Lane has size, good speed, and can be a big red zone target and deep threat and can play very well off of Zay Flowers. I love this pairing. This was like ideal in my mind. So I want this to work out. Keep your eye on this one. I don't know how much of a week 1 impact we'll get, but this is the type of rookie that I can see carving out a fantasy relevant role by mid-season. So someone that you want to target in deep leagues and keep your eye on and jump on waivers before he becomes a top priority and has a good second half of the season where he really breaks out and becomes someone who can help you out in the fantasy playoffs and even a championship. Let me preface this by saying that I came up with this argument for Kenyon Sadiq before the news of his setback regarding his hernia came out. But I felt like it was still important to include, right? Because supposedly the Jets feel like he will still be on track for week 1. I don't know if I buy that, but a setback does make me worry, honestly, that this will be a recurring issue and that it will be something that needs more attention. But if it doesn't, this is why we need to hear this argument, right? Because if it does not become an issue that carries on into the season, he's a good sleeper pick. And the ADP is low enough that it's not going to be a big risk. It feels like complete nonsense saying that a first round pick is a sleeper pick, but here we are because there was skepticism around Sadiq in general, and the Jets have and probably will remain a complete mess. Sadiq is a round 15 or later now pick, and it's been a while since we haven't had extreme hype around at least one rookie tight end. But 2026 is different. I was talking about this during my live show. I've been very disappointed by the lack of hype from our early round rookie picks there. Now, there is plenty of hype around other guys. The rookie out of New England is getting a ton of camp hype and is absolutely worth considering in very deep leagues or tight end premium leagues. Yet another rookie was drafted into the LA Rams with hype, but unfortunately, we don't know if anything is going to pan out with that because the Rams are so deep at tight end. But It is entirely possible that the best option really just is Kenyon Sadiq for a rookie tight end. One, he is not fighting the depth chart. Yes, Mason Taylor exists, but Kenyon Sadiq should be the tight end one. And two, it's possible that he is the second look in this offense, and it is also very possible that the second look in this Jets offense could be of fantasy value. I know it doesn't feel like it, but that's because we haven't had one consolidated, clear second look behind Garrett Wilson. If one of them can step up, it's entirely possible that they can get 80 to 100 targets fairly easily. There is zero reason why that can't be Sadiq. And while I don't particularly like or trust Frank Reich in general as an offensive coordinator, he is tight end friendly. So this can pan out. Again, we got to get past the injury, but keep your eye on this one because it's a late round pick. You're not fighting to have to pay up for him. So this is one that could be a little riskier pick that you take at the end of draft, but it's not super risky because it is so late. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find me across all social media platforms at It's Tera Time, so make sure that you're locked in, tune in, subscribe, turn on notifications, and all that good stuff. And also make sure to take advantage of that 25% off at RotoWire with code Tera, T-E-R-A, and use the link below in the description. Thank you for watching this video. We'll talk to you again later, guys.